I adjusted the neckline of my simple black dress, feeling distinctly out of place beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed walls of La Maison, Boston's most exclusive restaurant. It wasn't about money. My net worth could buy this building and the one next to it. But that wasn't the point. My family had chosen this place deliberately to remind me that I didn't belong. "Oh, Olivia," came Victoria's voice, sweetened with insincerity and echoing through the marble lobby. "I didn't think you'd actually come. This place is rather expensive." I caught my reflection in a nearby mirror. No designer logos, no diamonds, just a timeless black dress and my late grandmother's pearl earrings. Exactly the image I'd cultivated over the past decade. "I'll manage, Victoria," I said coolly, noting the smug look she exchanged with her husband James. As the maitre d' led us to our table, I overheard Victoria whisper to our mother, just loud enough, "I told you we should have picked somewhere more fitting for her budget." If only they knew I owned 40% of the restaurant group that acquired La Maison last year. The Morrison family dinner had always been an exercise in subtle cruelty. Ever since I left the family investment firm 10 years ago to waste my time with that tech startup nonsense, as my father had so generously put it, Victoria had done the opposite. She stayed, married James, now CFO of Morrison Financial, and built a perfect Beacon Hill life, complete with matching Mercedes and a talent for condescension. "So, Olivia," James began as we settled into our seats, his tone syrupy with superiority, "still working on that little app of yours?" I took a sip of water and thought of the email I'd received that morning, his company begging for a meeting with one of my firms. Something like that. What they didn't know, my little app, a fintech disruptor, had been quietly acquired by Google for $4.2 billion 3 years ago. Since then, I'd founded Artemis Capital, a private investment firm with global reach in aviation and technology. I operated through layered shell companies, my identity obscured from every angle. The only person who'd ever known the truth was my grandmother. Before she passed, she gave me the advice I'd carried like armor. Let them underestimate you. Sometimes the best revenge is patience. "She still drives that ancient Toyota," Victoria was saying, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Remember when she asked to borrow money for repairs last year?" I remembered. That same day, I signed off on the acquisition of a fleet of Gulfstream jets for Artemis Aviation, one of our newest subsidiaries. "Speaking of cars," James said, adjusting his designer tie, "Victoria and I just ordered the new Bentley. Fully customized. You really should try it sometime, Olivia. What's it like, taking the bus to work?" "It's great for my carbon footprint," I replied, thinking about the LEED-certified private jet terminal I'd recently built at Logan. My father chuckled. "Now, James, don't be too hard on her. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real finance. At least she's independent." He made independent sound like a terminal illness. "Oh," Victoria chimed. "James's news. Go ahead, honey." James puffed up like a peacock. "Thomson Airways is in talks to partner with us. If it closes, Morrison Financial will handle their East Coast operations. It's a billion-dollar deal." I kept my expression neutral. He had no idea that Thomson Airways had been acquired by Artemis Capital the previous year. Meaning, any deal would be with me. "That's exciting," I said smoothly, buttering a roll. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow morning," James said proudly. "Their CEO is flying in personally. That's how you know it's serious. Private jets, not bus passes. If only he knew the jet in question was mine, and that I'd be watching the entire meeting through a secure feed from my office. "I hear their CEO is quite mysterious," my father added. "Nobody knows much about them." "That's high-level business," James said with a patronizing smile. "Nothing you'd understand, Olivia. It's about real money, power, connections." "Speaking of money," Victoria said, waving over the waiter. "Olivia, they have a lovely house salad. Very reasonable." "I'll have the chef's tasting menu," I said, scanning the menu. With the wine pairings, the table fell silent. "That's over $500, my mother hissed. "You can't afford that." "Don't worry," I said softly. "I've been saving up." Victoria's face went red. "This isn't the place to pretend you're something you're not. It's embarrassing." "I'm not pretending," I said, meeting her eyes. James snorted. "Right. The girl who begged for car repairs is suddenly dropping $500,000 on dinner? What's next? A private jet? The irony nearly made me laugh. His phone buzzed. He stood and walked off to take the call, but I could still hear his panicked voice. What do you mean the Thomson Airways CEO canceled? The meeting's in 12 hours. This could ruin everything. He returned, pale. What's wrong? Victoria asked. Nothing, he muttered. Just business. Nothing you'd understand, Olivia. I took another sip of wine. Oh, Victoria said suddenly, this restaurant's part of the Le Mans Group. We bought shares last month. Didn't we, darling? James nodded smugly. Almost 5%. How wonderful, I said politely, remembering the board meeting where I'd approved their stock purchase through one of my holding companies. A waiter returned with my wine, a rare vintage worth more than their Bentley. Compliments of the owner, he said, bowing slightly. There must be a mistake, Victoria said. We're shareholders. We didn't authorize. No mistake, madam, the waiter replied. The owner was very specific. For Miss Morrison's table only. All eyes turned to me. I raised my glass, smiling. How generous. James's phone buzzed again. He excused himself once more. Victoria looked shaken. I don't understand. Why would the owner? Must be a mistake, my father said flatly. They probably think she's someone else. I just smiled. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The next morning, I sat in my private office on the top floor of the Artemis building, sipping coffee and watching the security feed as James paced nervously in the conference room. He'd arrived early, desperate to salvage what he thought would be the biggest deal of his career. Miss Morrison, my assistant Julia, said over the intercom. Your sister and father just arrived. They're with Mr. Thomson. Of course they were. Victoria never missed a chance to bask in her husband's supposed success. And my father, always there to remind everyone who the family genius was supposed to be. Perfect, I replied. Proceed as planned. I opened my laptop and cued the email. Subject: Thomson Airways, East Coast Operations. Dear Mr. Thomson, after careful consideration, Thomson Airways has decided to pursue other options for our East Coast partnership. While we appreciate Morrison Financial's interest, we believe our corporate cultures may not be aligned. Best regards, Olivia Morrison, CEO, Thomson Airways. I hit schedule. Delivery in 10 minutes. 10 years of silence, of patience, of being underestimated. Today, that all changed. Through the feed, I watched as more executives filed into the room. And James, still waiting, still unaware, but not for long. Victoria adjusted James's tie, murmuring what I assumed were words of encouragement. My father sat confidently at the table, smug as ever. Then Julia's voice came through the intercom. The Thomson Airways representatives are here. Send them in, I replied, watching the screen as 3 of my top executives entered the conference room. James leapt up, hand extended. Welcome. We've been looking forward to. Wait, where's your CEO? David Chun, my COO, gave a polite smile. Ms. Morrison sends her regrets. She's decided to handle this matter differently. Ms. Morrison? Victoria's voice sliced through the room. Right on cue, James's phone buzzed. I watched as he read the email, color draining from his face. This must be a mistake, he stammered. They're rejecting us. But why? David remained calm. Perhaps you should ask Olivia. Silence fell. Victoria laughed nervously. Olivia? What does she have to do with this? She can barely afford dinner. David tapped on his tablet and brought up a file. Olivia Morrison, he began. Founder and CEO of Artemis Capital. Owner of Thomson Airways, the Lamazon Group, and roughly 60 other companies through various subsidiaries. Current estimated net worth, $8.2 billion. That was my entrance. I stepped into the room. The silence turned to stunned disbelief. Victoria's mouth hung open, her lipstick suddenly garish against her pale face. James slumped into his chair, staring like he'd seen a ghost. My father stood frozen, hand clenched on the back of his chair. Good morning, I said pleasantly. I believe we need to discuss your professional conduct, James. This is impossible, Victoria whispered. You drive a Toyota. You borrowed money for repairs. Actually, I corrected her. I own the Toyota dealership. The repair story. Just something I let you enjoy believing. James found his voice. But Thomson Airways, the private jet, part of my personal fleet, I smiled. Would you like a tour? It's parked at my private terminal. My father finally spoke, his voice soft. All this time, you've been building an empire. Yes, I said, walking toward the window. While you all laughed at my little app, I built one of the largest private investment firms in the country. I turned to face them. That restaurant you're so proud of owning 5% of? I own 40%. The building where Morrison Financial leases space. Bought it last year. The jet service you desperately need? Just a sliver of my aviation division. Victoria had started to cry, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked. You were so sure I was a failure. It was easier to let you think that while I built something bigger than any of you could imagine. My father tried to recover. Now see here. No, I said sharply. You don't get to play the family card after a decade of watching your golden son-in-law humiliate me. I picked up a folder and set it on the table. Let's talk about Morrison Financial. My team found some irregularities in the books, James. Care to explain? James turned pale. Victoria snatched the report, flipping through it with trembling hands. James, what is this? But James said nothing. He knew. Here's what happens now, I continued. James resigns. Quietly. If he does, this stays private. If not, well, the SEC finds this kind of thing fascinating. You can't do this, my father protested. I already have. I pressed a button on the speakerphone. Julia, please execute Operation Clean Slate. Right away, Ms. Morrison. Victoria's voice cracked. What's Operation Clean Slate? As of this moment, Artemis Capital now holds a controlling interest in Morrison Financial. A full audit and leadership restructuring begins today. My father dropped into his chair. You're taking over the company? But that's our family's legacy. No, I corrected. It was your legacy. You wasted it playing favorites and ignoring corruption. I'm here to fix what you were too proud to see falling apart. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Victoria, that wine you enjoyed last night, from my private cellar, costs more than your new Bentley. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. James resigned as promised. Victoria filed for divorce as soon as she learned the full extent of his fraud. My father took early retirement, too humiliated to stay. I rebranded Morrison Financial under the Artemis Group, brought in the best forensic accountants, and instituted strict new oversight. The market responded well. The stock rose once analysts learned who was really in charge. 3 months later, my mother asked me to meet for coffee. She chose a quiet cafe this time, not La Maison. We sat in awkward silence for a few moments before she finally spoke. I don't understand, she said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I considered telling her. Why live like you were struggling when you were actually a billionaire? My mother asked the question gently, but I finished it for her. Because I wanted to see who people really were, how they treated someone they thought had nothing. It was educational. She looked down, guilt etched across her face. We were horrible to you. Yes, I said quietly. You were. Can you ever forgive us? I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into the darkness. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Mom. Trust is. You all showed me exactly who you were when you thought I was a failure. Why should I trust you now that you know I succeeded? She didn't have an answer. And I didn't need one. A year later, I was aboard my private jet. Yes, the same one James once bragged about as if he understood that world, returning from a successful deal in London. Victoria had remarried, this time to a junior accountant in Chicago. James was now selling cars in New Jersey. My father had retired to a small condo in Florida, the dream of his family empire, left behind in boardrooms he no longer belonged in. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Happy birthday, sis. I know I don't deserve it, but I miss you. I looked out the window at the clouds below, thinking about her message, about forgiveness, and about what success really costs. Maybe one day we'll be a real family again, one built on respect, not appearances, not manipulation, not power plays. But not today. Today, I was at peace knowing I had built something extraordinary. Not just in wealth, but in independence. In silence, while they were all busy mocking what they couldn't understand. My grandmother would have been proud. Miss Morrison, the flight attendant said, stepping into the cabin. We're about to land at your private terminal. I smiled, remembering James' snide remarks about jets and real money. Thank you. And could you have my Toyota ready? I feel like driving myself home today. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just succeeding. It's succeeding so completely that those who once laughed at you are left with nothing but the memory of their own arrogance. Sometimes, the one they mock for riding the bus ends up owning the jets they beg to board. That night, I opened the safe in my office and added James's resignation letter to my quiet collection of reminders. Next to it sat a worn dinner receipt from Lazen and an old, handwritten note from my grandmother. Let them underestimate you, my dear. Success is sweetest when they never see it coming. And she was right. It still is.